Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time and your attendance. This is the second panel of our Symposium of Immersive Experience Design and Extended Reality Technologies here at Arizona State University. My name is William Jesse Martinez, and I'm happy to be the moderator for this panel. As you can see on the screen, this panel aims to address the future potential and execution of extended reality technologies in education. Before we begin, I would love to have my panel introduce themselves to you all. Most of you know them, but.
Hello everyone, I'm Yen. I'm a visual designer and XR UX designer. I want to be in the panel because I believe experience is the best way to learn things. So I'm happy to be here to share some of my opinion.
Hello everyone, my name is Liu, and I am an international student here in ASU. I'm also a software engineer and a designer. So as an international student, I travel quite a lot and I have a lot of experience in different educational experience. So it'll be really interesting for me to see different aspects to this topic.
Hello everyone, my name is Anishika and I'm currently in my third semester. I am pursuing media arts and sciences in extended reality. I have a background of, my undergrad is in product design, and I believe that why this topic fits me is I've grown up seeing my mom trying, like she's a teacher, and I've seen her try to come up with creative ideas to teach in the classroom apart from just the textbooks. So I believe it would be a great way to learn more about it.
Hello everyone, my name is Michael Searle. I'm a first year graduate student in the Extended Reality Technologies track. And I have a background in theater, technology, film, and sculpture. So I'm interested in the convergence of this digital landscape with the physical realities as well. But I also have a background in some VR education training, and I'm interested in exploring the changes that have happened in the past few years as well as the future that it holds.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alba. I'm in my first semester of the Extended Reality programs. I'm doing the experience design one, and I graduated as a 3D animator and 3D modeler, and with a minor in film and media production. So I'm always been very interested in all the digital entertainment. And then entering to this program here, I became super interested in all the different applications that visual design can have, not only in entertainment, but education, healthcare, and many other things. And I'm very excited to have a discussion about education.
Oh, thank you guys. These are actually some of my favorite people in the cohort, so I'm very excited to hear their perspectives on this. But also, I really would like to point out how incredible it is to have such a diverse group here, from ages, different backgrounds, and also within the program itself. We're all at different, for the most part, we're all at different semesters, so we're all at different legs of this. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. So let's start digging into our discussion today. Fad or fact? Can extended reality technologies improve educational outcomes of students? With over 4,500 publications, you can imagine how complex the answers to this topic and question are. But we can attempt to break down the key components that can make these advancements universally successful. The relevance and applications of extended reality technologies will more than likely increase over the following decades, to include new advancements in how these tools are utilized in various sectors across the globe. However, there are several challenges for this technology to become an effective aspect of our daily lives, similar to how mobile phones evolved across the world. Some of these include financial barriers, personal opinion, perceived usefulness of the technology, and standardization. And we're going to discuss some of the parameters associated with these challenges and speculate in a practical sense how extended reality can improve cognitive goals in education. During the conversation, we'll be using terms like extended reality technology, but beyond that, we may say VR or AR or MR. Those mean virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. And most of you in the audience may be aware, but those of us, or those watching via stream may not be familiar. So when we say VR, we mean virtual reality, which you might be familiar with, full immersion, putting on a headset and being in this new space. Augmented reality being on, conversely, something in a physical space, a digital overlay that you might use your phone for. And then mixed reality is a bit in between, but we're likely going to be focusing on VR and AR today. But all three of those fall under extended reality technologies. And each one can be its own discussion of how it can be implemented into different sectors. The difference between VR and AR implementation is vast. But both can be, or all of them can be really incredible in moving this field forward. Also, we are going to be focusing on primary and secondary learning, so K through 12 and then higher learning education as well, not job training experiences to differentiate between those. However, there are a lot of design practices that can be implemented for both. First, I'm going to have a series of questions for the panelists divided into 3 categories that are integral to the wide-scale use of these resources. So it's accessibility, efficacy, and implementation. After our panel discussion, we will have more than enough time for questions from the audience on these categories, as well as other points mentioned in the discussion, and then anything else that is burning on your mind in regards to education and extended reality. We highly encourage you to participate in this discussion because not only do we have this unique opportunity to have these individuals here, but many of you in the audience are indirectly or directly involved with the future of extended reality technologies. So I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say. Especially because here at ASU, we have the Dreamscape pods, which you might hear some of the panelists mentioning that we have these facilities here at our university. And it's the Dreamscape Learn pods that we have here at Mesa and Tempe, which are these immersive learning environments. Now, and so that being said, moving on to the discussion itself. So does XR, or extended reality, overcome or create accessibility barriers for education? When looking towards the future of any technology, it's important to understand what limitations exist for the users and participants that you are addressing. So how can extended reality technologies increase accessibility?
Yeah, that's a great question, Will. As we look into the future of any technology, just like you mentioned, accessibility is one of the important assets to make the technology grow. According to a study sponsored by Verizon, on average, a student can learn 30% of what they hear, 20% of what they see, and 90% of what they experienced. With XR technology, we are able to not only see the class, hear the class, also experience it. So that will increase the learning outcome by a lot. But not of the school is lucky as ASU that we have a Dreamscape Learn here. And not all the school has the resource and money to put in to create an XR lab. In order to overcome the accessibility barrier, that would be a great opportunity if there is a XR community center involved. So instead of each school has their own XR lab, the XR community center can face 3 to 5 different schools that they have different classes on different days. In that way, not only the school will cut their expenses, also allow more students to access the VR headset and everything needed. And also, other than the school hours, it can also open for the public to introduce VR and other XR technology to audience. But accessibility is not only about the physical space, also the digital wise. So within all this designer here, keep in mind to design for students who has disability, and also for the students has the limited resource. What about to create more applications, having the download form will also impact the accessibility for the users.
That was a great answer. I could see us. So there's a few different things you mentioned there that could increase accessibility. One, it seemed like you centered on these VR spaces, but what about augmented reality? How could that play a role in this as well?
Yeah, AR, I've seen a lot of museums starting to use AR technology to do their virtual tours. So I think it would be great because my undergrad is School of the Art Institute of Chicago, so we have a massive museum there. So in my undergrad course, there are students are developing AR tools for museum tours to teach the art history in person. So that could be one of the aspects to implement AR in the learning space.
Okay, yeah, I could see how both those, or how that could be effective for that curriculum. Back to with these VR spaces, though. As you mentioned, with ASU, we are very fortunate to have these spaces here, but it certainly can't be an easy thing to construct and develop and maintain these kinds of spaces. And so at what scale would you imagine this actually working, where you make these shared spaces? Like, should it be something for just university level? Should it be shared spaces across age groups? I'm really interested in what you're saying about these like shared spaces to overcome the accessibility issue. So that way, like, someone doesn't have to have be in a university program to get access to these educational tools. So in your opinion, like what scale is practical in the coming years of making these shared spaces?
Yeah, I think college is definitely a best space for it, since we all have different courses in different area, in different classroom. So for extracurriculars, they just go to another quote-unquote campus, aka the XR Community Center. But for high schooler, that will be also very helpful, since they are eager learner. They have more energy, and they will love to learn more about that. So I think for my aspect, the teenager will benefit more from that.
You are very optimistic with teenagers and wanting to learn. No, great answers. And that actually brings me to another question. More on accessibility, because we're talking about the distribution of these new technologies into these different spaces, but how do extended reality technologies play into the distribution of current educational resources and in the future? Is anyone, that's open for anyone, yeah. I'll read, maybe I should re-say that, yeah. So in relation to accessibility, how do extended reality technologies play into the distribution of educational resources today and in the future? Okay.
I think education obviously is very important, because that's not only about our generation, but it's also about our next generation and essentially our future. So as human beings, I think it's our nature to fight for such resource. And in my opinion, the traditional education is almost impossible to be distributed balanced around the world. There are just so much limitation. For example, different physical locations have different economics, different politics, different education content. So it's not realistic that different area can access to the same quality of education. So now we are here in ASU, we have so much resource, and the XR, it seems like a cherry on top. We are talking about more immersive, more fun experience, but I want to focus on those places who don't have such resource as we do. And I believe that in the future, in a long-term view, those places who doesn't have that much resource going to benefit the most out of XRT, which is the extended reality technology. In the short term, it might seem redundant, almost cost inefficient, because there's so much precondition. You need to have a high-speed internet, you need to have the staff who knows the technology, which as ASU students, we are working on now. We are creating such content. But I think in the future, those who are going to benefit are those who don't have resource. And I'm going to give you my personal experience. So I came to US when I was 15, and I kind of experienced how the education system works in both the US and China. And I would say the most different way they're working is the US have more freedom. And that could be either good or bad, because it increased the upper limit, but it also lowered the lower limit. Imagine you run into a great teacher who can give you a fantastic lecture, but there also have those teachers who doesn't quite have such experience and have a hard time standing in front of a bunch of jumping teenagers and try to calm them down and without knowing how to teach. So based on that, you can see it almost seems like out of luck that you have a good education or not. And the greater education you have, the more money you're going to spend in education. Whereas in China, almost all the country are teaching the same thing. We have a national organization who will determine what school will teach the student. And every teacher in all the city will have this regular meeting, discuss how they're going to teach. So is education most up to date? No. Is this the most intriguing education we're going to get? No. But for the majority of Chinese people who have such a large population, I think it's a great solution because it just distributes education to those places who might not have those such budget, because the governments already provide you the materials and have those organizations who trains the teacher on how to teach. I think XRT could be going to the same route. Imagine in the future, we have this facility, this system built that almost like a computer we have nowadays, people can have their headset or even has our cell phone. Everybody has their own virtual device. How fast it can be for kids to access to those great immersive quality education content that we are creating now. So that's why I think we are providing, we are in a good shoes because we are working in this XR industry and we are providing a better future so that all the world could benefit from this.
Well, thank you for that in-depth answer. And there's a few things I want to touch on there. But I'd like to, does anyone else want to make a comment?
I can.
If not, okay.
I think you brought some very interesting points with your experience in China, because I'm from Spain, and we have a very similar situation in which all schools teach the same for every single subject. Like I had friends that went to another high school that were doing exactly the same books. And coming here in the US, I realized that this is not the case here. Like everywhere, every single different high school or middle school, they teach different things. They don't use the same book. And I think that's a big challenge for us creators on what to design for curriculum, because if every school is teaching something different, how are we going to make something that's like applied to different schools? Therefore, having one center that has like an extended reality center for VR headsets that multiple schools go to, how can we ensure that all schools are studying the same and it's applicable to all the kids? And I think there should be maybe a unification what's being taught to kids, but that's a much larger scale thing to work on if we want to do like VR extended reality in education. So there are many things that come up to my brain, my head, when he's talking about these things. I think there are many barriers that we need to work on if we want to implement VR.
I concur. I think, yeah, because you mentioned a couple things that immediately made me think of immediate barriers. So you said increasing accessibility for communities in China that wouldn't have these resources, and also if I understood right, like a lack of standardization between teachers, or at least what they were able to teach or their skill level. How do you think, I know you mentioned XRTs could follow a similar trajectory, but how do you think extended reality could fit into that problem specifically? How do you, because these are expensive technologies, so how do you practically get it to poorer communities if it's more expensive? What are some strategies to do that?
So my story is obviously a long-term beneficial hope. So I think for a short term, we can, of course, there's places that doesn't have the internet, that doesn't have the foundational infrastructure for the even communication and other devices. However, for those places, I do think extended reality technology is something that we need to develop with the traditional education system. That's not something that extended reality could replace. However, for those places who already have a well-maintenance infrastructure and who already have this community and the internet and the communication devices, we can start from those places, and we can start by in the public space. For example, some library. Sometimes library can have this computer lab. We can start building a VR lab in the library, and with the education content we built, so that the kids in the community could start exploring the technology and the content from the public resource. And also, I know that a lot of the college are recording the open courses. And I think we can do something similar for those universities who would like to contribute to their community. They can start putting out some free VR content. And if we are start building we are start accumulating this content from now, in the future, people are going to have more content, more accessible content. And for your concern, I don't think the point is to make everything the same, because that people who have the choice to learn something is the same or not is already a privilege. For those people who don't even have a choice, an opportunity is already a huge help for them. So building a well university includes all aspects of the resource, for example, a chemistry lab, a physics lab, a learning center, library, all that stuff combined, I think in the future is going to the budget going to be much higher than just building one VR lab. And with the content we are developing now, I believe the VR content could be, in a degree, match what they can learn in the real physical space, in a physical lab or a chemistry lab. So in that situation, pushing the process of building the infrastructure for VR is more beneficial. So that's my answer to that.
Thank you. It was a great answer, and thank you so far for the discussion. It's been great. I would like to move on from accessibility into our second section of efficacy. And you mentioned something there. You did mention a little bit about talking about traditional learning and how we should, when developing these technologies, they should go in tandem with traditional learning, not necessarily opposing, but often that's, or at least what I think when I think about the future of these immersive educational experiences, is that they are a replacement for the traditional. But I like that you mentioned that, as well also for answering that with the public resources of accessibility. Because if it's something that's open with given into the library for a community, then we can start to look at these things not as toys or fun experiences, but tools that can practically be used. So computers can be used for games, computers can be used for all kinds of things, but they're also one of the most, computers, phones, whatever, incredible pieces of technology we use to accomplish things. And extended reality technologies, in my eyes, should be seen in the same light as a tool that has many uses. But with that, back focusing on that comparison to traditional learning, does XR learning actually improve knowledge retention? So we've gotten our students access to the XRTs and the courses and lessons, but how can the developers of these experiences and instructors ensure that they can create something that actually improves the cognitive outcomes? What are the factors that actually make extended reality technology work in education?
I can follow on that question. So doing some research for this panel, there's a very long list of things that if you look for what makes education successful, there's a long list of things, very long list, but there were a couple of key elements that kept coming up, and they were interactivity, engagement, the level of interest from the students, setting up goals for the students too. And I think those are 4 key elements that are very important and that we can tackle fairly easily with extended realities. So I think that VR and AR can be an awesome tool because first of all, engagement. Nowadays, if you give a headset to any kid or even like young adults, we're excited. Like there's no way that we're not gonna be excited. So you already have the engagement from that. And the interactivity, if we learn 90% from experience, the nature of it, it's so easy to just dive into it and experience something that you will actually learn from way more than if you're just staring at a screen or a video that there's no back and forth. So as creators, we can have all these key elements in mind when creating and create experiences that are very interactive in which the students have to do things. We can set goals for them. There's an objective to the experience. And then the level of interest and the engagement, I think it's like goes hand by hand with introducing these new technologies in classes.
I really like that you mentioned the engagement and the fun of these technologies, because I'd like to challenge it. I wonder if the novelty effect and the engagement and immersion, if that really ties into increased learning. so just, you know, if a student is having fun in an experience, if it's not tied to the learning outcomes, is it still beneficial? Like, what's the limit of engagement? How much actual curriculum, you know, should be not say necessarily given up, but how much do you focus on engagement? Should there be, or is there diminishing returns on how fun an experience is when it relates to did the student actually learn anything?
I think that's a great question, and I think that's something we need to keep in mind when creating these experiences, because there's a very fine line in between creating a game and creating content for education and teaching. So that's on our hands in a way of like, let's create something that's engaging, but still with an objective, which is like the student has to come out of this experience learning something. Is engagement a bad thing, or like them having too much fun? I think it's better than them being super bored in class. You're probably gonna learn more if you're having fun than if you're just like falling asleep in the class. So I don't think that's a big problem. I think the better question is to how can I make this engaging thing like able to teach a lot of things to the students, you know, like at least if they're just gonna retain 50% of it, it's gonna be like useful in a sense.
I like the way you look at it that way. That
Michael has something to say.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Mike.
Just to build off of that really quick, I think it's also important to consider not just the content that they might be learning in a lesson plan, especially in like a K through 12 environment, but also the like social aspects of learning and collaborating with other students. So like teamwork and collaboration in that environment could also be important, as well as the content that's being learned. So if it's being done in a fun and engaging way that's encouraging this collaboration between students, I think it's important not just consider the content or lesson plans that are being delivered to these students.
Oh, incredible answer. Yeah, that's a great point. Because what I was saying kind of almost put engagement as opposed to learning, as if they can't, you know, be one or can't work together. But yeah, that was a great breakdown of how they can. One thing that makes me think of is the VR space specifically. AR is a bit different, but VR, you're really putting yourself like in this enclosed little chamber of your own. And yes, digitally you may communicate with others, but what you're saying is maybe, or that is the benefit of that, is when you're not only in the space by yourself, but when you are with other people working through the same problems and solving those solutions in an engaging and fun environment. That makes sense. But I think this only scratches the surface of you know, how these technology and experiences should be developed. There's also the question of who these experiences are better for, or should we focus these on children? Should we focus these types of things on higher learning with adults? You know, who's the best demographic for this? So I'm curious with the demographics of the population that would benefit the most. But firstly, back to how we were looking at traditional learning and these new immersive learning experiences, how they can tie into one another. I'm still curious, in what ways is extended reality technology better or worse than traditional learning? What's missing? What are you gaining? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would like to answer that. So I believe in the irreplaceable value of traditional learning, because it doesn't only get us to the knowledge, like the academic knowledge, but it also cultivates like social interactions, teamwork, as we spoke. And it is specifically more important for the younger ones to physically be in a space, in a lab, for the context of it. Plus, I also understand that they thrive with social connections, like making friends, learning from them or learning together actually. So I believe that extended reality should complement the traditional learning. Like there's a research, the learning pyramid, where it talks about the retention is much higher when there's audio, visual, and demonstration. So extended reality is a perfect help with traditional learning if we have those type of experiences. Um, for example, like if somebody wants to study about a specific historic period, it would be better off if they put on a VR headset and get inside of that era instead of sitting through a lecture or reading about it in a textbook. So, yeah, I think they should complement each other rather than trying to replace each other in a specific way.
Yeah, that's that's a great way of looking at it, because I think in the future they're going to be around. These technologies aren't going anywhere, and we've been following the same design of our classroom structure for education, at least in the United States, for well over 150 years. So like these changes will come. But I like that at the forefront, you're thinking, we need to think about what are the good parts about it, how can we utilize it effectively. So a follow-on question for that. Let's take the history example, because I think that's a great example of a type of class that could really benefit from the immersive experience of moving or putting yourself in a place or being in two places at once, right? I think a history lesson is perfect for that. So how would you implement it into a course?
I believe like if there's a history class in a school or university, there are things that the students need to learn, like the dates and everything. That would be the traditional learning where they take notes, write it with hand, because obviously the retention would increase when you write it, read it, and hear it. So if you are writing it, that's one thing. If you see it and hear it, that is increasing. So sort of combining the VR experience where you see the era and then you come out of it, make notes, and probably go back to the notes when you actually have to, like you have an exam or you're preparing for it. So it's probably it is a combination, right? Yes, you can take notes in a VR headset too now, but I mean, I would like to go back to my notes like whenever I want to, not to like put a headset, go back to my notes.
No, that makes sense, because you would always have to, yeah.
I mean, that's at least a bit of hassle right now because of I believe it's not very mature. The tech is not very mature right now that you can just put it on like glasses. Like it takes a little bit of effort to get used to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another factor that has to be considered is, whether they're students or children, adults, how they respond to having to put the headset on. So for many of us, maybe it's not a problem, but for a lot of others, it causes a lot of issues. But with that, you mentioned, this course, but I'm curious, what age demographic do you think could really benefit the most?
I'm again going to be optimistic about teenagers, as you said, because I believe they are more welcoming to new tech. Because the older people or the older generation, I won't mention the age because I don't want to call anyone old, but they're less welcoming as you grow older to new tech. Like maybe after 15 years, if somebody comes up to me and tells me to put on a heavy VR headset and learn how to like watch a movie on it, I would be hesitant. I would be reluctant. I would want to continue with my television rather than trying to switch something like user habits. I believe teenagers are a easy experiment, I would say. So yeah, I mean they're more welcoming and less reluctant. So maybe yeah, and younger than 8 or 6 would be difficult because again, there would be a little risk involved in that because they will not understand the technicalities of how to handle it very easily. Like it'll be harder to explain the controls and everything to them.
So a combination of you have this generation that are likely more familiar with the technology, one, or if not, they are familiar with the concept of, oh, I utilize technology to do things generally. I'm not that old, but yes, maybe some older generation. Maybe that's not as apparent for them. But that's great, and that actually kind of ties into implementation, which is our next discussion. So how should XR, or extended reality, be implemented to achieve consistent, replicable improvements to cognitive outcomes? So like, what are the things we should consider when, beyond development and creating the experience, but what are the next steps of getting it into the classroom, fitting it into a curriculum? What are those aspects that should be considered when we're beginning to do that?
I can take a crack at that. I think there are a few different things that are important to bring up in and around the design process. But first of all, maybe like learning styles of different students.
Learning styles. You mean like the audio, visual? Well, I should know at least more than two of them. The other ones, kinesthetic, and then reading, writing. Right? I'm not wrong on that. There's only four. I tried my best. And Ishka mentioned some of them, but learning styles. Yeah,
exactly. So building experiences and lesson plans designed around these for specific students, and making sure that there's going back to accessibility, an equitable amount of content that is catered towards students that might be more reserved or maybe want more hands-on training experience in a certain topic.
Do you think XR, whether VR or AR, I think could fit this, could be beneficial for both those types of students you mentioned, the ones that may be more active, want to get their hands on, and the ones that are a bit more reserved?
I do think that's actually a really good point. I think thinking about the surface level of it, VR can definitely be more helpful for those that are more hands-on, and AR can be maybe a little bit more for the passive viewer or learner. But I do think it's, going back to what Anishika was talking about, I think it's important to think about this connection from both like the traditional styles of learning as well as the XR, and thinking about how they can complement each other, not replace each other, and how maybe one extra computer lab day or XR lab day might be helpful for a certain type of student, or compared to a traditional lecture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have a wide variety of different types of students, and some definitely benefit from like sitting in a lecture and looking through PowerPoint slides and reading all the books and the notes, and then some may really thrive in those lab environments. But I think that's something unique about XR is it can benefit across these different learning styles, like you mentioned. But there's a few things that I've kind of brought up. You are a lot more hopeful. A couple of us are a lot more hopeful about the future with these technologies and how they can be implemented. And it just got me thinking, like, so how long do you think until we are in a fully digital dwelling, walking around as if there are our cell phones, headsets every day? And what kind of future does that look like?
I want to hope that that's not going to happen. All of us walking around with headsets. That just feels so dystopian to think about. As in VR headsets, I am opposed to it because if you guys have tried like VR headsets, it's like very, I don't know how to say it. Like you feel very alone in a headset. It's like you and like a fake reality that you're in. On the other hand, I think that AR, augmented reality, could be a good implementation of these technologies because you're still seeing real people, you're still seeing the world, and you don't lose that sense of community that you're in a school. Like just the thought of like walking into a classroom and seeing all kids with a VR headset, as in they're not like next to each other. That's just like, it's mind-blowing. And going up to that, I think that, yes, we're talking about implementing XR realities, but let's make it like an enhancement of the education system that we have instead of a replacement, because I think the nature of it, it's not very community-based. It's very like focused on one single experience, one person. And one thing about education, I think, is that 50-50 what you learn in terms of school, and then the other 50% on how to be a human, how to interact with other people. I mean, if I think of middle school, I don't remember why I studied. I remembered the day I went to the principal because I did something wrong, and the day that I had a fight with my friend, and all these little things that we learn. It would have been awesome to have classes that had VR and like XR, and like I would learn in a more immersive way, but we can take that away, like the social interaction with VRs. And I think, yeah.
That was a great answer. I mean, Lou, do you want to pass to?
I just want to add on really quick. Just adding on to that really quick, I wanted to bring up what we've mentioned a little bit earlier, as maybe instead of thinking about XR as like this maybe a little dystopian and walking around like the streets just in VR headsets or whatever, thinking about them as tools and how they can be used in a helpful way in just daily life or weekly life or whatever it is. So whether that be like new ways of experiencing entertainment or theater or films, or different ways of implementing them into society that aren't taking over daily life, but rather just adding new perspectives and really thinking about the ways that XR can be leveraged to its best abilities for things that are impossible, rare, or expensive, or dangerous, or things like that.
And speaking of dangerous, I think, focusing on education, that's a lot to say about our younger generation. And I definitely think there's more research need to be done, because what if this stimulation from XR VR devices is going to affect the development of children's brain or their visions or hearing? So not only they need to be done more research, but also they need to have a more organized, they need to have organization for monitoring the content, right? Because by the time we have those VR headsets, not only we are going to have more engaging education content, but we're also going to have a more advanced gaming experience and visual stimulation. With the VR headset, you cannot even see what your kid's watching, and imagine good parenting be like in the future. Nowadays, already parents are throwing iPad to their kids. What if in the future they're just throwing their 5-year-old kids a VR headset? Would that be a good parenting, right? Although there's great education content there, but how many kids are learning educational content on an iPad? So I definitely think there's more to think, in terms of the content and the research aspect.
Actually, yeah, I'd like to speak a little bit on that. I think because you both kind of touched on this as well, shaping the way we think about these devices, seeing them not as just for entertainment or stress release, but actual tools to be used for specific purposes. So that, because I think that mindset that a student goes in a classroom, and they see, let's say they see all the VR headsets on the desk for the day, they're like, oh, this is a day I don't have to pay attention, this is the fun day. But if you instill in them the understanding that this is not just this experience that we're doing for fun, you have to take lessons from this, you have to pay attention to it, and you will be graded for this. So changing that perspective of these things are just for games, but also you mentioned some challenges or hurdles that would prevent this from becoming an everyday part of life. But I noticed you mentioned VR a lot. But technologies now are coming up to a point where we can put on these headsets and have digital overlays in our physical environment, so mixed reality. Now, how do you see, because you mentioned AR could be an effective tool, but someday these headsets, with mixed reality, will be able to do that, but it is through a headset. And so in that way, how should those be implemented into a classroom? Should all of the students always have the digital overlay while the teacher is talking? What are some things, if we're really looking, because I think the implementation, whether we go VR, MR, AR, is going to be different. But if you were to have a device where you could see your teacher or listen to the lesson being conducted, but then there were digital elements that came in over a period of time when the teacher wanted them to, so they're not distracting. I think it could be something that could be really beneficial, because then you've all mentioned the social aspect as well, which is really important that we can't forget about. But with mixed reality, you could still be in that shared space with everyone. And then you could still see them, but then you still have the digital environments that you can then jump into seamlessly. So we've talked a lot about the technical aspects and practices that should go into this, but I do really want to touch on the social aspects of learning, especially in developmental years. How do you think XR or extended realities play into this? What are we losing if we go too far with these technologies? Even though there is a lot to be gained, like you've mentioned, the different types of ways that immersive experiences can challenge the mind visually, auditorily, and demonstration and tactile. But how could these social interactions, this aspect, be maintained with the implementation of XRs? How do we not lose that?
I guess the right balance again, because as you mentioned, it's not only about what we're studying, and it's also about with whom are we studying, like obviously the classrooms and the social equation with everybody around us, because we learn about different people, we learn about the ways people work, and I mean this everybody works in a different way, and if you're in a team, there might be a better way to do a certain thing. So I believe the perfect balance again would be correct to maintain the social.
Yeah, okay. You want to touch on that? Yeah. Okay. Great answer. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we are obviously very social beings. Like I remember once when I did the Dreamscape learn for the first time, and after the experience, they asked, "What did you think?" And they're like, "Oh, it was so cool that you could see the other people around you." And they were like, "Well, those are fake people. It's just so you feel that you're in a classroom." So even though we're still in a VR environment, we still crave for that social interaction, seeing other people. And there will be experiences in which we can implement that, and others then we cannot. But I think one way that it will, I hope that it will keep it like social, is that you go to a movie and you're watching it, and then it ends and you go to the person that you watched the movie with and you talked about it. And I hope that this will happen also with these experiences, that you finish it, let's say the 30 minutes long, and then you're like, okay, what did you just experience? What was it? Let's talk about what we went through together, So I think there are ways that will still be done.
Yeah, well, that reflection period, I think, for two things, that social interaction if you reflect in a group, but then also knowledge retention, reflecting immediately after you do some sort of experience could likely lead to helping with that retention. This has been incredible, but that ends our discussion for the panelists. Thank you very much for all of your insights and your perspectives on this. It has been great. This has been a lot of fun. But I'd like to open the floor to our audience for any questions to our panelists that you may have, as well as those online who are streaming. If you have any questions, we can also answer those.
Hey, you were mentioning chemistry, and as we're talking about XR in education, obviously you were talking about it's not like one size fits all. It's not going to replace. It's a modality, but to a certain degree, education is a zero-sum game, right? If you're taking something away, if you're doing something, it might replace something else. And when it comes to chemistry, for example, what sort of thoughts do you have about that you don't spend time in an actual lab where you learn about the dangers and the smells and the actual details of the experience compared to maybe a more efficient learning experience in VR where you can like do the same experiments over and over again? Can you maybe, if you had any thoughts about this, like the replacement of certain experiences by doing VR and XR compared to traditional education? I hope I'm making myself clear. I might be rambling.
Yeah, for that, like I mentioned, Dreamscape approach right now is instead of like replacing the lab itself with the XR experience, they kind of do it as a rehearsal. They teach you all the things you need to learn for this class before they prepare you before you're actually going to the lab. So reinforce the knowledge you need to have before you actually go into the lab. Also reduce some dangerousness of it. I hope that makes sense. Cool.
Hey everyone. Thanks for the panel. I was excited to hear about, you know, kind of the vision of like a community XR center. And that's actually what we have here, right? We have the Mix Center. And then right next door, they're building out assets that are all about getting the local community more involved and providing resources and stuff. So they just launched you know, an entrepreneurial thing in the kind of basement of the studios next door that's about different technologies that entrepreneurs could leverage, podcasting, but they have a VR space as well. So as sort of some of the leaders over here in kind of pursuing XR and the future of education, what would you be excited about trying to teach the community or to kind of share some first experiences that might help get community engaged in what this is all about?
I guess it would start with, like, to get the attention of people, probably starts with the entertainment factor. I mean, if people, we want to get them here just to know what's going on and probably later educate them about it. So it would probably start with games or movies or experiences later on, probably.
Yeah, I actually transferred my major from traditional user experience to this extended reality technology because during my first semester here in ASU, I got an invitation to join one of the workshop day, open house day. They have a lot of experience for Access VR, and some artists are introducing their work. So for that, at least for me, it was very effective, and that made me realize, oh, it can be literally the next generation of good user experience. That's why I transferred here. So definitely reach out to random people not even in the any contact with VR before, they might get interested and transferred, just like me, to participate in this community. Yeah.
So I agree with both of my panelists, and I do think it is going to be a long progress because nowadays, in general, people are still viewing VR headsets as a toy, and there are going to be a lot more that we need to do so that the VR headset to become a tool. But even as what we have for now, it's also interesting to push this information into the community because I have run into so many people are interested in such technology but have no idea that we have such resource. I've mentioned that to my Uber driver and they're all excited seeing that I'm just going to this lab in their community and they have no idea what is inside this building. And we have host some open days in the mix and in our studio too. And there's a lot of enthusiastic people who come to our lab and with their children, with the future generation, who are interested in the content that we're creating. So I'm really excited about where the Mix Center is heading and how it's going to provide more resource to the people in the community and also to share this information with them.
And I think also that a good way that we could introduce these technologies to the community would be like creating courses of like broader things. For example, like one course on evolution, or some historic time, let's say World War II, that they can experience, but it's still in the educational sense, so they can experience firsthand what it's like going through one of these courses, but maybe less, not part of a curriculum, but more like a broader experience.
Do we have any questions from the stream? Okay. And so if there's no more questions, give a couple more seconds. Okay. Thank you all for being here today. And thank you, the panelists, for being here and talking about this. It's great. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure.